time pretty much. They missed the 2 free throws, we got the ball.
Yeah, 1 minute to the end. High pressure. Finito.
Won the game.
I never forget that.
In 2002, a team from Madrid walked into a Final Four and played basketball that the rest of Europe had never seen before. Not faster, not more athletic, smarter. Systematically, brutally smarter. They passed the ball 23 times before taking a shot, and every single pass made the defense worse. When the shot finally came, it was open. It was always open.
You finally got it, and you get it.
The people watching didn't know it yet, but they were watching the future. Not just the future of European basketball. The future of the game itself.
Finally, it was really great result for us.
We talk about dynasties in basketball like they're about trophies, about rings, about titles stacked on top of each other until the story writes itself. But the dynasties that actually matter, the ones that reach across time and change how the game is played, those aren't defined by what they won. They're defined by what they made everyone else do differently. This is a story about 4 of those dynasties.
As a team, if we stay calm, if we stay like a team, we can win the game.
4 organizations that didn't just dominate EuroLeague basketball. They cracked it open, rebuilt it, and handed it back to the world in a different shape. By the end of this, you won't just know who won, you'll understand how they won and why it still matters today, including on courts in the NBA. Let's start where the modern game begins. Real Madrid's basketball program is older than almost any other professional club in the world. They've been winning championships since 1964. But the version of Real Madrid that changed the sport wasn't built on history. It was built on a philosophy. And that philosophy had a name, Ettore Messina.
Every day, probably, you discover something.
Messina arrived at Real Madrid in 1998 after already winning EuroLeague titles with Buckler Bologna and Virtus Bologna in the 1990s. What he brought wasn't a system in the mechanical sense, not a set of plays you run from a sheet. What he brought was a way of thinking about offense that treated every possession as a chess problem with a correct answer. The principle was simple to state and almost impossible to execute. Every offensive possession should end in either a high-quality shot or a free throw, and the path to that outcome should be designed before the play starts, not improvised after it breaks down. In practice, this meant Real Madrid ran what analysts now call structured read and react offense, sets that looked like motion but had specific triggers and counters embedded in them. If the defense gave you X, you took X. If they took X away, you had already been trained to find Y. The result was a team that almost never got stuck, almost never forced shots, almost never gave possessions away through chaos. In 2000, they won the EuroLeague. In 2003, they won it again. And in both runs, what stands out watching the footage isn't the athleticism, it's the patience. Real Madrid in those years played slower than almost any team in Europe. They held the ball, they probed, they made the defense communicate 40 feet from the basket, which is exhausting, and then they attacked the breakdown that exhaustion created. This was not sexy basketball. Spanish commentators sometimes criticized it for lacking spectacle. But it was correct basketball. And correct basketball, over 40 minutes, wins more than it loses. Here's the basketball insight that most people miss about that Real Madrid era. They didn't just use the Spain pick and roll, they weaponized the counter to it. Most European defenses in that period were beginning to understand how to hedge against ball screen actions. Step up on the ball handler, recover the roller. Messina's teams read that hedge in real time and built skip passes and corner relocations into the set that punished it. By the time defenses adjusted, another action had already started. The basketball world took notice. But the team that truly took Messina's ideas and industrialized them was not in Spain. It was in Greece. Say the name Panathinaikos to any European basketball fan over 40, and watch their face change. Between 1996 and 2011, Panathinaikos reached the EuroLeague Final Four 10 times. They won the title 6 times. 6. In a competition where parity is enforced by budget, geography, and the brutal unpredictability of European playoff basketball, one Greek club from Athens won it 6 times in 15 years. That is not normal. That requires explanation. Part of the explanation is organizational. Panathinaikos built a culture of winning that functioned as its own recruitment tool. Players came not just for money, but for the chance to be part of something. The green jersey carried weight. In Athens, Panathinaikos basketball was not a sporting event. It was a civic religion. But culture doesn't win championships by itself. Tactics do. The architect of the tactically transformative version of Panathinaikos was Željko Obradović, the most decorated coach in EuroLeague history. 9 EuroLeague titles across his career, 4 of them with Panathinaikos. When people in Europe talk about coaching genius, they are usually, if they're being specific, talking about Obradović. What Obradović built at Panathinaikos was a defensive system so sophisticated and so physically demanding that it changed the standard for what was expected of professional European players. The core of it was this: Panathinaikos defended with aggression at the point of attack while maintaining perfect structural discipline in help rotations. Most teams pick one or the other. You either gamble at the ball and accept that your helpers will scramble, or you sit back and concede easy pull-up jumpers. Obradović demanded both simultaneously. He could do this because he selected and developed players who understood geometry, where to be when the ball is on the wing, how far to shade toward the paint when your man is one pass away. The result was a defense that was simultaneously the most aggressive and the least gamble-prone in EuroLeague history. They didn't give up open threes because they had already accounted for the kickout before the drive started. Offensively, Panathinaikos ran through their bigs in ways that were ahead of their time. Dimitris Diamantidis, arguably the most complete European player of his generation, functioned as an offensive processor. He didn't take over games. He made games unmanageable for defenses by making the correct read faster than defenders could communicate. He was the human embodiment of Obradovic's system. The 2009 Panathinaikos team, which beat CSKA Moscow in a Final Four that still gets referenced in tactical discussions today, demonstrated something profound. A system that is perfectly internalized by players who believe in it is virtually impossible to prepare for in a week. You cannot scout a mindset. Let's talk about the other side of that rivalry. CSKA Moscow has been the most consistent organization in EuroLeague history since 2006.
The President of the Czech Republic gives the award to Sergei Panov.
Not the most beloved, not the most romanticized, but the most consistently excellent. And consistency at that level is its own form of genius. What CSKA built in the mid-2000s under Ettore Messina, who had moved from Real Madrid, and later under Dimitris Itoudis, was something that European basketball had never seen. A squad built like an NBA franchise. Deep, talented at every position, capable of changing the game's pace, style, and personnel matchup by matchup. The financial backing was real, and it would be dishonest to ignore that. But money alone doesn't explain 6 EuroLeague Final Fours between 2006 and 2016. What explains that is the translation of resources into a specific basketball identity. CSKA's identity was controlled aggression. They could play fast, but they chose when to play fast. They could play physical, but they calibrated the physicality to drain opponents over 40 minutes rather than intimidate them in bursts. They were the first European team that consistently made opponents feel like they were playing uphill, not because CSKA was bigger or stronger, but because CSKA was always half a step ahead in terms of preparation. The basketball insight here is about tempo manipulation, and it's one of the most undervalued concepts in the sport. CSKA under Messina would spend the first quarter of a game deliberately varying the pace, one possession fast, the next methodical, specifically to prevent the opposing defense from settling into a rhythm. A defense that doesn't know what speed the game is going to be played at cannot optimize its positioning. It has to be ready for everything. Being ready for everything means being perfectly prepared for nothing. CSKA exploited that uncertainty relentlessly. Theodoros Papaloukas, their point guard in the championship years of the mid-2000s, was the instrument of this manipulation. He was not explosive. He was not a great shooter. What he was the most temporally intelligent point guard in European basketball history, a player who understood how the speed of a single dribble could change the calculus of an entire defense. In 2008, CSKA finally broke through and won the EuroLeague title, ending Panathinaikos' stranglehold on the competition. The rivalry between these two clubs through the 2000s is arguably the greatest sustained competition in European basketball history. Two different visions of how the game should be played, meeting in playoff conditions every spring, each one pushing the other toward a higher standard. That kind of sustained rivalry doesn't just produce winners, it produces evolution. For a long time, there was a quiet assumption in European basketball. A ceiling. EuroLeague basketball was tactically sophisticated, yes, but it was conservative. Teams built systems around minimizing mistakes rather than creating advantages. The three-point line existed as a pressure valve, not as a primary weapon. Ball movement was virtuous, but cautious.
Zasimi attacks, he's buffeted, oh my goodness! And
Then Anadolu Efes hired Ergin Ataman, and then they got Vasilija Micic. Between 2021 and 2022, Efes won back-to-back EuroLeague titles, becoming only the third team in history to accomplish that. But what made those titles historically significant?
And he's still a loose ball, and there is the final buzzer.
Wasn't the back-to-back, it was the style. Efes played basketball that finally reconciled European structure with modern offensive freedom. They ran set plays that opened into improvisation.
The three is up and good from Elijah Bryant.
They used ball screens not as endpoints, but as initiators for multi-action sequences. They spread the floor with shooting but attacked the paint with physicality. They were the first European team to consistently punish switch-everything defenses, which had been the tactical trend sweeping both EuroLeague and the NBA, because Mikic could beat any individual defender one-on-one after the switch, regardless of size. The basketball intelligence in what Efes did is worth unpacking carefully because it represents the cutting edge of where European basketball has arrived. For years, switch-everything defense was considered the answer to every high ball screen action. Match up, switch, eliminate the coverage crease. Efes solved it with what you might call the sequenced mismatch, a set that first established defensive switching behavior in the opening minutes of a game, then, once that behavior was locked in, ran a specific action designed to generate a mismatch against the smallest defender on the floor,
Boubois pulling up for the transition three.
and had Micic or Shane Larkin isolate that mismatch without allowing the defense time to recover communication. It sounds complicated. In execution, it was devastating, and it forced every EuroLeague defensive coordinator to spend the next 2 summers redesigning their switching protocols. Micic, who eventually signed with the Charlotte Hornets and later Oklahoma City, brought that same intelligent violence to the NBA. His game translated not because of athleticism, he was average by NBA standards, but because the habits of decision-making he had built in EuroLeague were simply correct. You can't guard correct decisions by being faster than them. You have to anticipate them. And anticipating Micic was, for several years, beyond most teams.
With the dribble, gets to the halo. Shane Larkin for three, off the back iron. Ball is in the air, and it's still a loose ball, and there is the fan.
Here is the insight that connects all 4 of these dynasties. The thing that ties Real Madrid to Panathinaikos, to CSKA, to Efes, across 30 years of basketball evolution. Every single one of them was built around a central basketball idea that was ahead of the competition. Not just better execution of the same idea, a different idea. Messina's Real Madrid said, "Possession control is offense."
I steal plays from them all the time, very honestly. Coach Obradović is somebody that I enjoy just watching the flow of his game and the way that the team passes the ball and moves.
Obradovic's Panathinaikos said, "Defensive structure is an art form, not a sacrifice." CSKA said, "Tempo is a weapon, and the team that controls speed controls everything." Efes said, "Structure and freedom are not opposites." Each of those ideas, when they were introduced, was considered extreme, too slow, too rigid, too complex, too risky. New dynasties are forming in the data. The cycle continues, but it continues on higher ground than it started. And that higher ground was built by the teams in this film. They didn't just change European basketball. They handed the global game a better version of itself.